Have you ever asked yourself, why does walking away from someone you still love feel like the biggest turning point of your life? Not because the love is gone, but because, for the first time, you begin to see clearly. True love doesn't cling. It doesn't demand. It doesn't ask you to betray yourself just to hold on to someone who's no longer walking beside you. Leaving isn't coldness. It's the beginning of loving with freedom. And then something strange happens. The farther you walk from them, the closer you walk toward yourself. Their absence no longer feels like emptiness. It becomes a bell of awakening. You're no longer the one begging for love in the silence. You become the one who can love without attachment. Love without chains, without control, without losing yourself in the process. So what really happens in that moment when we leave someone we once loved deeply? Let's sit with that story through the lens of Zen, through the wisdom of Buddhist teachings. And maybe, just maybe, you'll recognize yourself in it. True love doesn't hold tight. It gives both people the space to grow and become. It sounds like a contradiction, doesn't it? We're taught from an early age, if you love someone, hold on tight. Work harder. Do everything you can to keep the relationship alive. But as we grow, we begin to see the deeper truth. There is a kind of love that doesn't need to hold on, doesn't need to chase, and doesn't need to fight against reality. It simply is, and it lets go when the time comes. Over the years, I've spoken with so many people on this path of healing and awakening. They come to me with hopeful eyes, but hearts tangled in pain. They say, "Teacher, I still love them, but I'm exhausted. I feel like I'm forcing something that's slipping through my fingers." And after a quiet pause, I often say, "Maybe it's because you still love them that you need to let go." Letting go doesn't mean your heart has turned cold. Quite the opposite. It's because the love is still real that walking away feels so deeply painful. But that's what gives the act its power. An act of compassion not only for them, but for yourself. There are loves that are deep and true, but can no longer continue. Not because either person did something wrong, but because the two have reached a crossroads. One wants to stay. The other feels called to go deeper into themselves, into truth, into awakening. And if love no longer helps both souls grow, sooner or later, it becomes a cage for one and a burden for the other. I once read a Zen saying that I never forgot. If you love a flower, don't pick it. Let it grow in the soil that sustains it. Love too should be like that. If we love someone truly, sometimes the most loving thing we can do is let them go. Or let ourselves go from something that no longer nourishes either heart. There's something rare and sacred about pure love. It doesn't possess. It doesn't control. It doesn't grip at all costs. It allows the other to be fully themselves, whether they stay or whether they go. And the same must be true for yourself. If a relationship makes you shrink, makes you trade your values for a few fleeting moments of closeness, then maybe it's not love anymore. Maybe it's just a silent agreement between two people who are afraid to be alone. Letting go is never easy. It doesn't happen in a single moment. It comes quietly. When you begin to realize you're no longer yourself in that relationship, when you start to ask, why am I trying this hard just to be loved? Or, why does this love make me feel small instead of free? And then, one morning, you wake up and finally see love should never be what makes you lose yourself. Letting go doesn't mean the love has died. It means that love is no longer living in a way that's healthy It's no longer a place where you expand. It's become a place where you slowly disappear. Walking away in love is one of the highest forms of love because it doesn't come from rejection. It comes from deep understanding that this bond, however meaningful, is now harming more than it's healing. And real love never harms. Real love heals. It nourishes. It helps you become more of who you are, not less. So if you're standing in that hard place right now, if you're loving someone deeply but still feel called to leave, let me tell you this gently. You're not wrong. You're not selfish. You're not weak. In fact, that may be the most loving and mature decision of your life. Because love isn't about holding on. It's about understanding. Understanding when to stay and when to step away, not with anger, but with silent blessing. And sometimes, only when you have the courage to step out of a love that no longer feeds you, will you discover a deeper love, the one that begins from within. That's when you return to yourself, to your whole heart, to a peace that no one else can take from you. And one day, when you look back, you won't feel regret for walking away. You'll feel gratitude. Gratitude for the version of you that chose compassion over attachment. Gratitude for the growth. Gratitude for the grace. Because the person who dares to walk away in love is the one who's finally learning what love truly means. When you walk away, you're not just leaving the other person. You're leaving behind an old version of yourself. Let me share a truth with you, one that not everyone is ready to hear. When you walk away from someone you once loved deeply, you're not just walking away from them. You're walking away from a version of you that no longer fits who you're becoming. And often, that's the hardest part. Because in love, we don't just bond with another person. We also slowly create a version of ourselves we think we have to be in order to be loved. We learn to quiet our voice, to shrink ourselves, to tolerate more than we should. We start believing, if I just try a little harder, maybe things will change. But a little harder always turns into more silence, more compromise, more self-abandonment. And slowly, we become someone we barely recognize, someone who's exhausted but still trying to hold it all together. I've sat with so many people who've shared stories like this. They loved deeply, loved enough to lose themselves in the process. They didn't realize that while they were trying to save the relationship, they were slowly tightening a rope around their own heart. Every time they stayed silent, every time they swallowed their truth, that rope got tighter until one day they couldn't breathe inside that love anymore. The Buddha once said, if you're holding onto a rope that's tied to suffering, you are the one who's making the knot tighter. It sounds simple, but if you've ever been in a love that became more pain than peace, you know it's deeply true. We often think it's the other person who hurt us. But sometimes, the deepest pain doesn't come from what they did. It comes from our own decision to stay too long, to trust too much, to give beyond our limits, to fear leaving more than we feared disappearing. Have you ever been in that space, where you knew the love wasn't the same, but you kept holding on anyway? Telling yourself, if I just love them a little more, maybe they'll come back to me. And when they didn't, you blamed yourself, thought you weren't enough. And you clung not just to the person, but to the idea of who you were in that love. But here's the truth. Some things don't need more effort. Some relationships, when you walk away, you're not losing love. You're reclaiming yourself. And the moment you decide to let go, that's the moment you begin to return home. You stop chasing texts that never come. You stop replaying old conversations asking, when did it all change? You stop needing to see your reflection in someone else's eyes because you start seeing yourself clearly through your own heart. When you walk away, you don't just leave a person behind. You leave behind the version of you who believed love meant enduring pain, the version who confused attachment with kindness, the version who thought silence was the only way to keep someone from leaving. And in the quiet that follows, in that emptiness that feels so unfamiliar at first, you begin to hear your own voice again. Not loud, but honest. And that voice no longer asks, how do I get them back? It starts to ask, how do I want to live now? What do I still believe in? That is the beginning of awakening. You stop needing external validation. You stop needing someone beside you just to feel whole. You begin to slow down, not because you're sad, but because you're no longer running from yourself. And maybe, for the first time in a long time, your heart feels still. Now, don't get me wrong, this journey isn't easy. It's not a quick fix. It's not a clean break followed by immediate clarity. It's a winding road, quiet, uneven, but with every step, you're coming back to the part of you that used to smile at morning light, that took joy in a warm cup of tea, that found peace in solitude, not loneliness, but solitude. And one day, when you're strong enough to look back, you'll see it clearly. That decision to walk away, it didn't just save you from a love that no longer fed your soul. It freed you from the version of yourself who thought suffering was the price of love. Because only when we release who we were, can we truly arrive in the present as who we're meant to be. So, are you ready to walk away? Not because you've stopped loving them, but because you finally started loving yourself in the right way. And that kind of love changes everything. The pain after a breakup isn't your enemy, it's your hidden teacher. I know there are nights, long and heavy, after someone you loved is gone, and all you can do is lie there in the dark, holding your heart like it's breaking apart piece by piece. There's no one beside you, no message to check, nothing left to hold on to. And you wonder, why does it hurt this much? How can love leave behind such an emptiness? But what if I told you that pain, as unbearable as it feels, isn't your enemy? It didn't come to punish you for loving the wrong person. It came to reveal something within you, something that's been quietly waiting to be healed. Most of us treat pain like something we need to escape. We want to move through it quickly, avoid it, numb it, get over it. But in Zen Buddhism, there's a beautiful concept called Kencho, a moment of sudden awakening, a glimpse into your true nature. And here's the paradox. Kencho rarely shows up in peaceful moments. It comes through heartbreak, through collapse, through the exact moment you think you can't go on. That's when you see the thing you thought you couldn't live without was just a chapter, not the whole story. In a way, pain is a silent teacher, a little stern, yes, but deeply honest. It won't comfort you with sweet words. It won't soothe you with false hope. It will look you in the eye and whisper, "It's time to come home to yourself." Think about it. Before the breakup, weren't you always too busy to check in with your own heart? Too wrapped up in giving, fixing, or holding things together that you forgot to ask, how do I actually feel? What do I need? Then suddenly, silence. No more distractions. No more noise. And you're left with the one person you can't avoid you. No one else to blame. No storyline to hide behind. Just truth. And at first, truth hurts. But slowly, you begin to hear a new kind of sound within you. The quiet echo of memories, of dreams you once set aside. You remember the small joys, the freedom of a slow morning, the comfort of sunlight on your skin. The version of yourself that used to smile without needing a reason. I call it a kind of spiritual remembering. Not remembering them, but remembering you. The you that existed before you gave yourself away in exchange for love. And in that moment, that still, trembling moment, Kensho arrives. Not from a book, not from a quote, but from real, raw, lived pain. Awakening doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes, it's as quiet as a morning when your hands still shake. But you know, deep down, you're not going to call them anymore. You still miss them. But something inside has shifted. You begin to forgive, not just them, but yourself, for not knowing how to love better, for staying too long, for believing you couldn't survive without them. That's not the end. That's the beginning of returning. And soon you notice you're not angry anymore. You're not wishing they'd come back. You're just grateful. Grateful for the break, because it helped you see what you couldn't before. Grateful that you once loved even if it wasn't perfect. Grateful that now you're learning how to love again, but this time from the inside out. You see, when pain is met with presence, when you don't run from it but sit with it, breathe through it, it stops being suffering. It becomes light. It becomes a doorway. And behind that doorway, a place you've never been before, where you don't need anyone to love you, to feel worthy, because you have finally become the one giving that love to yourself. So if you're in pain right now, let me gently say, don't rush through it. Don't pressure yourself to move on or get over it. Let the pain teach you. Let it shape you like a wise teacher who's tough but loving. And one day, you'll wake up and smile for no reason. Not because someone came back, but because you did. You came back to yourself, to life, to love that needs no conditions. And that is the kind of love that lasts. Not everyone has the courage to walk away while still in love, but those who do are stepping into a deep spiritual evolution. I want to tell you something that maybe no one has ever said to you with true sincerity. Leaving someone while you still love them is not weakness. In fact, it may be one of the most courageous and noble acts a human being can make in this lifetime. Not everyone has the strength to do that. Because walking away, when your heart still aches, when their presence still lingers in every quiet corner of your mind, requires a kind of maturity that doesn't come from logic, but from a deep inner awakening. We're often told that love means staying, that if you truly love someone, you hold on. But there comes a time when you realize staying is no longer love. It's attachment. It's a disguised, clinging, dressed up as loyalty. It's a cycle that keeps repeating. You get hurt. You forgive. You hope. You're disappointed. You try again. You break again. And all the while, that silent spiral of karma chips away at your heart, piece by piece. In Buddhist teachings, there's something I hold close. Letting go at the right time is an act of spiritual ethics. It might sound contradictory, doesn't it? But allow me to explain. Ethics, in this sense, isn't about social approval, not about right or wrong in the eyes of others. It's about spiritual integrity, the clarity to recognize that if you continue, you're not just hurting yourself. You're hurting the other person too. You're keeping alive a relationship that no longer nourishes either of you. It's become a mirror that only reflects unhealed wounds back and forth. And you know, deep down, it's time to stop. Many people are afraid to leave because they think it makes them selfish. But in Buddhism, letting go out of true compassion is not selfishness, it's loving kindness. Compassion isn't just staying to take care of someone. It's also knowing when to step back, so both hearts can finally breathe. I once met a middle-aged woman. Her eyes were gentle, but held a quiet sorrow. She told me, "I love him. I really do. But I'm tired. I'm drained. I don't feel like myself anymore. But I'm afraid if I leave, I'll feel guilty." I looked at her, paused for a moment, then asked, "If staying is killing your spirit, what exactly are you feeling guilty about?" And I truly believe this. Those who walk away with awareness are evolving. Not evolving in status or knowledge, but in consciousness. They're choosing to end the karmic loops. They're choosing a new path, even if they have to walk it alone, even if their heart still hurts. I know it's hard to leave without looking back. Hard to say goodbye while still quietly praying for their peace. But it's in that very moment when you walk away without bitterness that you break free. You're no longer bound by the what ifs, the should haves, or the if onlys. You begin to live in truth. And truth, while sometimes cold, is crystal clear. We often fear the end because we think it means loss. But sometimes, an ending is the kindest thing you can offer to both souls. A mindful ending becomes the beginning of freedom. It severs the invisible thread of karma, that tie that kept you in cycles of blind sacrifice and silent exhaustion, long after the love had run dry. And one morning you'll wake up and you won't be angry anymore. You won't be begging the universe to bring them back. Instead, you'll begin praying not for them, but for your own heart to heal. And strangely, beautifully, that's when you'll realize you've become someone new. No longer playing an old role, no longer avoiding your lessons, no longer stuck in a story that's already been told too many times. You are evolving. You are no longer living like someone trapped in karma. You're becoming someone who transforms it through love, through awareness, through the brave, sacred timing of letting go. And I want you to remember this. You didn't leave because you stopped loving. You left because you loved enough to stop hurting them and yourself. That is the highest form of love. And it's the first step toward the deep freedom your heart has been quietly yearning for all along. Walking away is a way of transforming karmic energy between two people. There's something I've witnessed again and again in the journeys of those who have walked through heartbreak. When you stop holding on to someone, you're not just letting go of a relationship. You're doing something far more profound. You're transforming a stream of karmic energy between two souls. Now, I know that might sound mystical, but if you've ever loved someone so deeply, so much that you lost pieces of yourself in the process and then had to let them go, you already understand exactly what I mean. Every deep relationship, especially the ones we can't seem to leave, the ones that linger, holds more than memories, more than emotions. It holds an energetic bond, invisible, often powerful, that ties two people together in cycles. Cycles of pain, cycles of expectation, cycles of one being the needy one, the other being the tolerant one. One always giving, the other always receiving. Have you ever found yourself being the one who always tries to save the relationship? The one who texts first? Apologizes first? Even when you're not wrong? If so, you've become the anchor in that energetic pattern, pouring your life force into holding something together that may already be falling apart. But eventually, you get tired, and you stop. And in that moment, which might feel like failure or loss, you're actually doing something sacred. You begin to withdraw your energy from the karmic pattern. You stop explaining. You stop chasing. You stop trying to be the healer, the fixer, the one who forgives endlessly. You return to yourself quiet, whole, and present. And something surprising happens. Your absence, you're no longer doing anything, becomes a mirror. A mirror that reflects back to the other person all the space you used to fill. Suddenly, without your constant presence, they feel the emptiness. They realize they no longer have you as their cushion, their safety net, their always there person. And that emptiness becomes a lesson. People often ask me, what should I do to make them see my worth? And I gently say, you don't need to do anything. Sometimes your silence teaches more than your words ever could. But this silence isn't cold or passive-aggressive. It's not manipulation. It's not disguised anger. It's the silence of true surrender. It's the step outside the karmic wheel without blame, without hoping they'll come back and change. When you pull your energy out of an unhealthy bond, you're doing something compassionate not just for you, but for them too. Because as long as you keep feeding that codependency, you both stay stuck in an old script. The more you cling, the more you enable their lack of change. But when you step back, when you leave, you stop fueling stagnation. And that break in the pattern opens the door for real transformation. Maybe they'll grow from it if they're ready to look within. Maybe you will learning not to love through self-sacrifice again. I truly believe some relationships exist to teach us a lesson. And once that lesson is complete, if we keep holding on, all we're doing is prolonging the pain. But if we're wise enough to step away, to stop playing the role of the one who carries the weight, then that karmic tie begins to dissolve. Not through action, but through the stillness of letting go. Do you see? Walking away is also an action, but it's the action of maturity. The move of someone who understands. Not everything is meant to be fixed. Not everyone is yours to save. And not every love is meant to last if it's keeping both hearts small. So if you find yourself in a relationship that's draining you to your core, pause. Not to escape in pain, but to offer yourself and the other person something else. A chance to learn, a chance to grow, a chance to be free. Because sometimes, your absence wakes them up more than your presence ever could. And in that sacred silence, in that brave surrender, you're not abandoning them, you're transforming the karma with compassion. And with the light of awakening. After you walk away, the silence isn't loneliness. It's a sanctuary. When you walk away from someone who once felt like your entire world, the first thing you feel is not freedom. It's emptiness. No more familiar messages. No more shared plans. No more glances. No more name echoing through your every thought. Just you, alone. And in that stillness, a question whispers so softly, yet with the weight of a lifetime. Who am I? Without them, there's no immediate answer. Not because it doesn't exist, but because it doesn't come from the mind. It comes from living. It comes from the smallest moments, the ones you forgot how to live for yourself. That first morning, you don't reach for your phone, waiting for a good morning text. You just sit there, quietly, watching the sunlight pour through the window. And maybe, for the first time in a long time, you realize how beautiful the morning light is. Even when no one is lying beside you, you make yourself a cup of tea. Not to share, not to start a conversation, just to sip with full awareness. You feel the warmth in your hands. You notice the gentle aroma rising from the cup. And suddenly, silence isn't scary anymore. It's not loneliness. It's a deep kind of freedom. When you go for a walk, you're not scanning the crowd for a familiar face. You're just walking, step by step, breath by breath. The sun still shines, the breeze still moves. And then something begins to shift. You're still alive, and you don't need anyone else to feel that fully. Before, you read books to escape your feelings. Now, you read to understand, to grow, to come back to yourself. Each page no longer a hiding place, but a door. A door that opens to a version of you that doesn't need to run, doesn't need to explain, doesn't need to be seen to be real. And slowly, piece by piece, you begin to return. Not louder, not stronger, but clearer. You're not trying to prove anything. You're not waiting for anyone to validate you. You're just learning how to breathe again, how to walk again, how to sit still and listen to your own heart without pressure, without fear, without clinging. I call this space the meditation sanctuary. It's not a physical place, but it can be found anywhere. It's that inner state where you stop chasing what's outside and start living from within. Where you no longer try to be someone for someone else. You just show up. And here's the beautiful part. Presence doesn't need to be loud to be meaningful. It's quiet. It's deep. It heals in silence like a still lake after a storm. Most people fear the emptiness after a breakup because they think it's the end. But maybe, just maybe, this is the very first time in your life you've touched a real beginning. You're no longer swept up in someone else's emotional tides. You're no longer reshaping yourself just to keep the peace. You're no longer stretching to fit a role that was never yours. Now, you're simply living fully. Whether you're washing dishes, watering a plant, or just lying there listening to the wind through the window, the answer to "Who am I without them?" doesn't arrive in words. It comes in a breath you no longer hold back, a dreamless sleep that finally feels restful, a day that doesn't require a performance. And then one day, without realizing exactly when, you notice something. The silence doesn't scare you anymore. It feels sacred. It feels like home. That's when you know you didn't survive the pain by running. You walk through it slowly, honestly, and you see with gentle wonder, you never truly lost anyone. You simply found your way back to yourself. When you no longer need anyone to feel worthy, you've come home to your truest self. There's a quiet moment on the journey back to yourself. It's not flashy. It doesn't feel like a victory. It's not loud or dramatic. It's more like a mountain standing silently in the mist. It's the moment you realize you no longer need anyone to validate your worth. You don't need to be loved to feel lovable. You don't need praise to believe you're good enough. You don't need someone holding your hand to know you're not alone. And when this happens, it doesn't feel triumphant. It feels peaceful. Like setting down a heavy bag you didn't even know you'd been carrying for years. In Zen, they call this the original face. It's the you that existed before the world told you who to be. Before you learned to hide your feelings to avoid getting hurt. Before you started wearing masks to be accepted, loved, or remembered. Your original face isn't perfect, but it's real. It doesn't have anything to prove. It doesn't twist itself to please others. It simply is nothing added, nothing taken away. I once sat across from a man in his 60-second gray hair, deep voice, a life full of stories. 2 divorces, a near bankruptcy. He looked me in the eyes and said something I'll never forget. You know, I spent my whole life chasing love, money, and status just to prove I was worthy. But the truth is, I always was. I just didn't know it. That line, I think a lot of us need to hear it. And not just hear it, believe it. From a young age, we're taught to measure our value by how others see us. By our grades, our success, our popularity, and slowly, we start living for approval. We fall in love not just to love, but to be chosen. We work not just to grow, but to avoid being left behind. We stay in painful relationships just to prove. If they leave, it must mean I wasn't enough. But here's the truth. When you finally get quiet, when you've let someone go, when you've walked through the heartbreak, you start to see what Zen calls your true face. Not the face others painted for you with their compliments or their criticism. Not the version of you shaped by roles or expectations, but the one that never needed fixing, the one that never needed to perform. It's the moment you stop trying to impress. You stop dressing to make them regret leaving. You stop smiling wide to show you're okay. You stop posting online to prove you've moved on. You just live. Simply, softly, fully, in the little moments. And the magic? When you no longer need to prove your worth to anyone, your worth starts to shine on its own. No applause, no audience, just you, finally seeing yourself clearly. You know you're lovable even if no one's loving you right now. You know you're enough even if your bank account doesn't look like someone else's Bration. You know you're at peace even if no one checks in every day. You start living like someone who just woke up from a long dream. A dream where everything was defined by the outside world. And now, you come home to your inside world, to the part of you that can't be taken away, traded, or measured. Your original face isn't something you need to go out and find. It was never lost. It was just buried beneath fear, expectation, and the belief that you had to become something to be loved. Now, in the stillness, all you have to do is gently dust it off with trust, with presence, with one mindful breath at a time. When you no longer need anyone to feel worthy, you stop chasing love. You become love. And that kind of love, it doesn't depend on who comes or who goes. It simply remains within you, radiating like a quiet flame, bright enough without needing to be seen. That's the quiet, powerful beauty of someone who's come home to themselves. And I truly believe, if you go deep enough, slow enough, and real enough, you'll get there too. Not to a place without pain, but to a place where you don't need pain to know you're alive. One day, you wake up and realize you've stopped waiting. Not because you forgot them, not because the love is gone, but because your heart, after quietly melting in, longing for so long, has finally chosen to come home to itself. You no longer glance at your phone, hoping for a message. You no longer read between the lines of their posts, searching for a sign. You no longer sit awake at night asking, "Are they thinking of me?" The waiting has ended. Not with anger, not with bitterness, but with a gentle peace. Because you've learned something life-changing. Love doesn't come from begging. It comes from wholeness. And that wholeness has to begin within. You used to think, if they came back, everything would be okay. But now you know, even if they did, I'm no longer the person who would beg for that. Because you've changed. You walked through every layer of grief, denial, anger, bargaining, despair, and finally, you arrived at acceptance. Not the kind that feels numb, but the kind that no longer needs someone else to feel lovable. And that's when you became love for yourself. No one taught you how to get there. No book fully prepared you for it. It came like a quiet breeze after the storm. After you cried enough, waited long enough, hurt deep enough to realize the person you were waiting for may never return. But you, the one who truly matters, has always been here, right inside this beating chest. I know it's not easy to reach this place, but once you do, you'll see there's nothing left to go back to. Not because your heart is closed, but because now it's open in a whole new way. Freer, fuller, lighter. That person, they might come back. They might apologize. They might say they miss you. But those words don't hold your heart like they once did. Because you're no longer the one who used to sit around imagining that scene. You don't need anyone to return just to feel whole again. Because you've walked through your own ruins, picked up the pieces with tenderness, patience, and a kind of love you never gave yourself before. You now take care of your body, not to make them regret leaving, but because you want to feel well. You choose to eat well, sleep deeply, read, smile, not to prove anything, but because you deserve it. You reconnect with forgotten parts of yourself. Simple joy, natural laughter, the quiet of an early morning. And somewhere along the way, you realize no one ever truly abandoned you, except you, in those moments when you gave yourself away just to keep someone else from leaving. But that was then. Now, you choose to stay with you. And when you do that, you stop handing the power of love to someone else. You bring it back. You become the candle in your own heart. So maybe they come back, maybe they don't, but you're no longer the one waiting at that door. You're walking forward, not rushed, not bitter, just alive. And love, real love, is no longer someone arriving to make you feel worthy. It's you, the one who sat with yourself through the loneliest nights, the one who stood back up from heartbreak with no one's hand, the one who learned to love yourself unconditionally when no one else stayed. So, if today you still feel sad, still miss them, still hope, that's okay too. But please remember this: the miracle begins the moment you stop waiting for someone to love you and start choosing to love yourself. And the beautiful thing is, you can begin that right here, right now. Maybe one of the hardest things we ever have to do in life is letting go. Since we were young, we've been taught to persist, to hold on, that if we just don't give up, one day happiness will come. But the older we get, the more we realize a strange truth. Sometimes letting go is the bravest and wisest thing you can do for yourself. Of course, it's easier said than done, because deep down there's always that quiet fear. If I let go, does that mean I failed? Does that mean I wasn't good enough to keep them? We're afraid of being seen as the one who lost, the one who gave up. And so we stay not for love, not for joy, but because we're afraid of losing face, afraid of letting go of something we thought should have been ours. But in Buddhism, letting go is not a failure. It's not a denial of love or effort or the importance of someone who was once a part of your soul. Letting go is wisdom in action. It's the moment you take a step back and clearly see the limits of a connection. When you know you've come to the end of this road, and if you keep going, it'll only lead to more pain. I once spoke with a woman in her 50s. She said, I stayed with him for 25 years, but in the final ones, I lived like a shadow, unheard, disrespected, I kept thinking that if I just tried a little harder, I could save the marriage. I listened, then gently asked, "While you were trying so hard, were you still yourself?" And she broke down in tears. Because here's something we rarely admit. Blind effort, when it doesn't come from clear, compassionate love, can actually be a form of ignorance. But letting go, when it comes from clarity and compassion, is a form of wisdom. In Buddhism, there's a teaching called knowing enough. It doesn't mean settling for suffering. It means understanding your limit, knowing when to keep planting seeds, and when to stop before you crush your own soul. The end of a connection isn't always about a lack of trying. Sometimes it's about waking up enough to say, "I've gone as far as I can, and anything beyond this is just me holding on too tightly." Some goodbyes don't happen because love ran out, but because the journey of growth has ended. Some people aren't bad. They're just no longer in harmony with your path. And some relationships, if stretched too long, only trap both people in a cycle of exhaustion, resentment, and slowly losing their self-worth. So letting go doesn't mean you're turning your back on love. It means you're turning toward truth. And truth, even when it hurts, is the only thing that can break the loop of expectations that no longer serve you. I know part of you may still feel regret, but ask yourself, are you grieving them, or are you grieving the version of yourself that was once loved? And if that version is no longer who you are, does clinging to them still make sense? Letting go doesn't mean you forget. It simply means you accept. Not all beautiful things are meant to last forever. And sometimes, the most beautiful part of a connection is knowing when it ends. So if you're standing at a crossroads, wondering whether to hold on or let go, I only ask this: listen to the silence in your heart. Don't let the fear of being judged keep you stuck in something that no longer feels like home. And please don't confuse letting go with weakness, because some retreats are actually the first steps toward truly coming home. Coming home to peace. Coming home to yourself. Coming home to the spiritual path you may have lost while trying to hold on to something that no longer fits who you are becoming. And that is wisdom in full bloom. There's something strange and almost magical that happens after you finally let go of someone you once loved deeply. You used to think that if they came back, you'd fall right back into the same old cycle. But one day, you realize, even if that love does return, you're no longer the same person who waited in quiet desperation. And that love, if it does come back, can't come back in the same way. Because what once hurt you can't touch you the same anymore. Because you've changed. I know that deep inside every heart that's been broken, there's a quiet little voice whispering, maybe someday they'll come back, wiser, kinder, more capable of loving me the right way. And that hope isn't wrong. But here's the truth, and it needs to be said clearly. If love comes back, it has to return in a new form. It can't be the kind of love that clings, controls, or fills a void. It must be a love born of awareness, a love that carries humility, a love that offers freedom. No longer, I need you to feel worthy, but rather, I cherish you because you are free and so am I. And if that doesn't happen, if love doesn't return in that new form, you'll still be okay. Because you've learned the most important lesson of all. Love isn't about dependency. It's about space, growth, respect. Seeing each other not with hungry eyes, but with eyes that understand. I once met a man who had walked away from a 20-year marriage filled with conflict. After 2 years of living alone, healing, and learning how to be whole without anyone by his side, his ex-wife reached out. They talked, they walked, they shared, and he told me, "The person who came back today isn't the one I said goodbye to, and I'm no longer the man who begged her to stay." They started again, not to repeat the past, but to write a new chapter, only if both had truly learned what needed to be learned. And if not, if that person comes back just to replay old mistakes, to demand more love than they give, to still not truly see you for who you are, then you'll smile, gently, not out of coldness, but because you now understand something powerful. Love without control is the only love worth having. Letting go doesn't mean the door is locked forever. It just means you're allowing the universe to test whether, if that door does open again, the two people who walk through it are newer, softer, freer versions of who they once were. And if not, that's okay too. Because the greatest love you found after the goodbye wasn't from them. It was from yourself. You no longer fear being alone. You no longer fear losing. Because you've found a place no one can take away. Your own heart, now capable of loving without needing to hold on. And if true love does return, it must come back like a new breeze. Gentle, clear, and full of space to let each other just be. But if it doesn't return, or if it comes back still wearing the old mask, you keep walking. No looking back. No regret. Because you finally know, love isn't the place where you lose yourself to be enough. Love is where you both get to be fully yourselves and still choose each other. If they return and walk with you from that place, beautiful. If they don't, you're still at peace. Because now, you no longer love to fill a hole. You love from a place that's already whole, already full, already free. And love born from that kind of fullness will never break you the way it once did. One day, you're simply taking a walk in the late afternoon. The wind is soft. The sun is slowly dipping behind the trees. And suddenly, an old memory drifts through your mind. No warning, no song, no photo to trigger it. It just arrives, like a wisp of smoke, like the scent of something familiar on an old street. You think of them, that person. But here's the strange part, it doesn't hurt anymore. There's no lump in your throat, no echo of why or what if, just a small smile, soft as a breath. And in that moment, you know, you've healed. You don't need anyone to tell you. You don't need a milestone to prove it. You just know, because you can think of them and your heart stays light. Not tight, only gratitude remains. Not for what they gave you, but for what their leaving helped awaken in you. For the version of you that was born from the heartbreak. You smile, not because you want them back, not because you need them to see that you're okay now. You smile because you realize, in some quiet way, they led you back to yourself. No one can plan this journey. You can't read a book to learn how to heal a broken heart. You can't rush it with a checklist or move on faster plan. All you can do is stay with yourself day after day. Tend to your heart with patience, with mindfulness, with the same love you once poured into someone else, but now, you know, you deserve it too. You start walking more mindfully. You eat slower, no longer trying to fill an emptiness. You read not to forget someone, but to remember who you are. And little by little, the memories become sacred, no longer chains. You can tell the story without choking up. You can hear that song and not break down. You can pass by the old place and not turn away. Because now, all of it is part of you, not needing to be erased or replaced. When we're still hurting, we want to forget. When we're still angry, we want to erase it all. But when you've truly healed, you don't want to forget. You want to say, thank you. Because you know, if it hadn't been for them, you wouldn't have learned to stand on your own. If it weren't for that pain, you wouldn't have learned to hold yourself. And if that ending hadn't happened, you wouldn't have stepped onto this path, the path of awakening, where you return to your purest self, free of clinging, free of blame, free of need. We don't meet people only to love them. Sometimes we meet them to learn. And some people come into our lives, not to stay, but to point us back to the road we forgot. And when you see that, you understand. True love doesn't always have to stay in your life. It can become a light inside of you, a memory that no longer drowns you but lifts you. A chapter in your story that planted the seed of who you are today. And if you're somewhere in the middle of this journey, if you're still aching, I just want you to know you'll get there too. To that place where you can think of them and feel peace. Where you understand no one is ever truly lost. If you learn something from their leaving, they don't need to come back to close your wounds. Because you are the one who's been healing yourself all along. And that no one can take away. If you've walked this journey, or if you're somewhere on the path right now, I invite you to share your story in the comments below. Because maybe the words you write will be the light someone else needs in their dark moment. Maybe what you've learned is exactly what someone out there is longing to hear. If this video touched your heart in any way, please like as a quiet thank you to your own journey. Subscribe to Buddhism Seeds, where we grow mindful, healing, and heartfelt truths together. And share this with someone who might need it, as the gift you once wished for on your most uncertain days. Love doesn't disappear. It just transforms. So you can finally see the one you've needed all along was always you.